photographer, you don't want to talk to people. You actually just want to be, as journalist does the talking, you want to be a fly on the wall, just observing things. What a photographer really wants to be is invisible. We don't want anyone to look at us or change their emotion because they see us. I think because it's quite a creative job, that's why I don't get bored. It's not doing the same thing every day. I'm using a camera, but everything outside of that camera is different. It's just the instrument. My name is Chris Stowers. I'm a photojournalist, photographer from England, and I've been in this job for the last 35 years. My passion for photography, I think, very fortunately, it's something I love to do, because if you did not love to do it, it would be a very hard job. So I always think, oh, I've been in the same job for 35 years, but every day is a different job, because I don't know what I'm going to be photographing the next day. Every person I go to photograph is a different personality, is a different character. They can react differently to the camera. The environment is different, the lighting is different. There's always a challenge. And you just learn, as a photographer, you just learn to deal with little problems as they come up, and don't get too worried about them, you know. And sometimes the picture you think was the worst one turns out to be the best. Some photography, you have to be very forceful and exert your character to get people to do what you want them to do. And other photography, you have to absorb their essence, their character, and draw them out of themselves so they do something and tell you a story, and and are comfortable with you being there photographing them during their intimate moments. At the end of the day, if I've got one good picture, I'm happy for that day. So, the most emotional picture, these would, ironically, I think people get most emotional here during public demonstrations, and I've photographed many of these, either political rallies or, I have to say, in 2014, during the Sunflower Movement. That was one of the key moments I remember photographing in Taiwan. The other one was the 1996 election, the first presidential election. People really got emotional and worked up at these rallies, and families were kind of arguing with each other about who to support, because they suddenly had a choice of who to support politically. And then when there was the transition from the KMT to the DPP in 2000, there was some pretty big demonstrations outside the KMT headquarters, I remember, where the police were there with water cannon and firing on us journalists and the crowds and everyone. I mean, that was very emotional. At the beginning of the pandemic, I was doing a story for the LA Times here about homeless people. You don't really see them, you don't look at them until you actually go up to them and you start to ask questions and to listen to why are these people living here and what's their backstory, and then suddenly you start to see them everywhere, and it's like, wow, it's actually a huge issue. Mr. Chen. Oh, Chen Ivan. You're a photographer, right? The one I felt in a way closest to was the old photographer, Mr. Chen. He was on Shiju Island. He used to have quite a thriving business, photographing mostly the soldiers based on his island, and they didn't have cameras. They were quite expensive things to have, and they needed to have pictures to send back to their parents or to their girlfriends back in Taiwan. And he had a really interesting photo studio, but you could tell it hadn't been used for about 20 years. As we organized his studio and got it back into order, so looking something like it used to do when he was young, I gave him my camera at one point, and he took a picture of me, and he really knew how to, he still got it, you know, he knew how to use the room. So I think old photographers never die. We were quite happy just sitting there side by side looking at his pictures, and then I was explaining parts of my camera to him, and he was, taking pictures with it, and it's like two old buddies. This is one where I was taking photos inside here.
suppose. Slightly different angle. That's the same staircase coming down here. 5 steps up, turn corner, go up, and there's that window.